Okay guys, this is my setup. These are all the tools you'll ever need to paint an entire house, let alone a room. That being said, there's links in the description to all the tools that I use. If you want to check those out, go ahead. In the meantime, I'm just going to give you guys a brief overview of the tools, and I'll explain them in more detail as the video goes along. Okay guys, we got a 9-inch, 3/8" nap microfiber roller. We got a 4-inch, 1/4" nap microfiber roller. We've got a 4-inch roller frame, 9-inch roller frame. You're going to want to get yourself a 2.5-inch. This is a Purdy 2.5-inch angle sash, and this one is a stiff. You want to get yourself a 5-gallon painting grid, 5-gallon painting bucket. You're going to want yourself a bucket with some water and a clean rag. You're going to want yourself a little bit of spackling. Of course, you're going to want paint. You're going to want a 2 to 4 extension pole. You're going to want a drywall sanding pad along with the sanding paper. You're going to want yourself some frog tape, and you're going to want yourself a 5-in-1, and you're going to want yourself a razor knife. Last but not least, get yourself a step ladder of some sort so you can reach those high spots. Okay guys, now we're going to take everything away from our walls and we're going to try to put it to the center of the room. We're going to get a drop cloth. We're going to cover them. Let's make sure we take all our pictures down and put them somewhere where they're protected. Okay guys, now we're going to be removing our switch plates, and this is where that 5-in-1 I introduced earlier comes in handy, because it is a screwdriver for these flatheads that are most common on these switch plates. And sometimes this thing will get stuck with old paint. You just take your 5-in-1 and tap it and it'll break right off. Now we'll hit our light switch covers. And what I like to do is put the screws back in the cover, take a small piece of tape, put it over the top to secure that. These things are so easy to lose. Now get yourself some paper towels and some all-purpose cleaner. We're going to go along to all of our baseboard and trim, and we're going to spray the top of those and wipe them down real good. That way they're nice and clean. Especially pay attention to the tops of your trim, because that's where that dust collects real bad, you guys. So the first thing we're going to do before we move on is we're going to go ahead and tape everything off. Now, there's 3 or 4 different reasons why I use this frog tape. And one of the first secrets I'm going to let you guys in on is even a professional painter can't paint as straight of a line as I can make while using tape. And at the end of the day, it's all about details and quality, folks. And that's what we're looking for. Nice, fresh, crisp, clean lines. Okay guys, so 9 times out of 10, when you first pull your tape off, you're not going to have a straight edge, especially if it's been used before. This is why I like to use my 5-in-1 again. And I'm just going to start with as close as I can get to a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to rip a nice clean piece off to start with. Now we're going to come down here in our corner, and that's why I cut this piece at a 90, because you can see right here. Now I don't want anything going up on the wall. If I had an extra piece of tape, it would have blocked my wall. Now I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to go just slightly onto the trim with my tape. And now there's several reasons why I do that. One of them being is it's going to help prevent bridging. The other reason being is when I look at this wall from this angle, if I'm standing in the room, I don't want to see any of this trim paint up on my wall. I would rather see just a tiny bit of the wall down on the trim. And I'm going to attach it like this. And I'm going to keep working my way down. But here's how I do it. I'm going to put my 2 fingers right here. And instead of holding the tape like this and pulling like this, what happens if you do that is you get this rounded edge and you lose the advantage of this factory cut. And this is how the secret to getting these super straight lines. And when I pull this out, I'm just going to hold my hand like this and use the wall to keep that line straight. So I'm not bowing my tape out. And I'm just putting that teeny tiny gap right there, you guys. And I just keep working my way down just like that. And now I use my thumb right here, and I can control how much. And I look and see, tack it down, tack it down, tack it down, and just keep on going all the way to your corner, you guys. Okay, so once you've got your tape down, you're going to take your 5-in-1 again, and you're going to tool this edge down, and you're really going to just going to go over the edge of that tape where that tape meets the wall. And you're going to slightly push down on that edge to lock it in. And you want to try and get this all in one run so that you're not piecing it out like this. I had to piece it out right here to get over this phone line. And the same when you're doing your trim, guys. You want to go a little bit on your trim, leave a small gap to prevent bridging, And you're pulling it the same way you're using the wall here to pull your tape out straight. And then you're tacking it down. See that little tiny gap there I got? And it's leaning more towards the trim side. Tool it off. Okay guys, and you want to leave your tape off the trim. You just want this top edge to stick. You don't want to stick this down to your trim like that. You want to leave it up and just that top edge. This is going to serve a purpose later in the process. Now in this step, we're going to get our drop cloth laid out. And you really only need one of these. A runner will work just fine. You just want to move it to every wall you paint at. So I'll lay my drop cloth down here, prep, paint, move to the next wall. Okay guys, in this step, we're going to be spackling any little holes, anything over 1/4 of an inch. I recommend using drywall mud. In this case, we don't have those. So we're just going to use this shrink-free. It's a lightweight, quick dry spackling. We're going to go around and we're going to look for all our holes and we're going to fill them. Now when we're filling those holes, we want to make sure we go both directions when we put our spackling on. So while our spackling is drying, we're going to go around and we're going to look for these like little imperfections, these little bumps and stuff. And instead of sanding those down, because that'll take forever, especially with this finish on here, got a little trick for you guys. Another one of those painting secrets. If you just take your 5-in-1, take the razor out, and you're going to come over to your wall and you're going to put your razor on there right against the wall and seesaw back and forth and cut that thing smooth. Now you're going to go around to all your spots that are like that, and you're just going to cut those off with your razor knife. And that's going to bring that back to flush. Okay, so once you've got all your high spots scraped off, we're going to go over those with spackling just like we did the others. Okay guys, so now we're just going to get our sanding pad and our sandpaper, and this thing has little tabs on the back that open up, and your sandpaper slides in that crease, and you want just barely enough on there. And you clamp that down, bring this over, and then you're going to work it into there, into that side, and that's ready to go. Now we're just going to hook our extension pole to it, and we're going to sand our wall. Okay, I'm using a 220 grit on this. You can use a 180, then a 220, but these walls aren't really that bad, so I'm just going to use a 220. Okay guys, really important step that I see a lot of people miss in these videos on how to paint a room. After you sand, you're going to want to wipe these walls down, because now you got sanding dust on those walls. It's going to interfere with the adhesion of your paint if you don't wipe it off. Get yourself a broom and wipe those walls all the way down. Now we're going to take our paintbrush that we're going to use to paint. Before we paint with it, we're going to wipe all the dust that we just created on the top of this frog tape. And that's one of the reasons we use this frog tape, is so that we don't have dust collecting before we paint on the top of that trim. And here's one of those secrets I was telling you guys about. Get yourself a wet rag before you paint. Before we even get into our paint, we're just going to get a damp cloth. We're going to go along the edge of our frog tape, and we're just going to wipe right on the edge of that frog tape where we tooled it down earlier. And what this is going to do is go ahead and activate our tape and get those polymers. There's polymers in the side of that tape. It's going to swell them up to prevent any bleed through. Okay guys, so another secret I want to tell you guys about. Professional painters generally don't use pans to roll out of. The reason that is because they have a tendency to be stepped in. That's not good. Plus you can hold more paint in a 5-gallon bucket. So if you're rolling a whole room, you don't want to keep reloading it every time you need it. Now you get your 5-gallon roller grid, stick it in here, and you're going to pour some paint in here. Now you're going to want about 3 to 4 inches in the bottom of your 5-gallon bucket to give you ample material to work with and load that roller up. And you're going to use this to dip your brush in to do your cut-ins. Okay guys, so here's the super secret weapon. This is M1 latex paint extender, also known as conditioner. And to a gallon, you want 2 to 6. I usually use about 4 per, but I'll normally eyeball it. So I'll just pour me a little in each one, and I'll give it a good mix. Okay, what that paint extender is going to allow you to do is have more open time. And what I mean by that is just going to extend the dry time. So you're going to have more time before the paint dries, which you probably need if this is your first time doing it, to eliminate any overlappings or dry edge. That being said, It'll also make the paint flow more smoothly, lay down flat, eliminate brush marks and roller marks. This stuff's great. And the next secret you guys will never expect. Now before we even do any painting, first thing we gotta do is we gotta get this lint off this roller. Even though this thing says lint free, don't go for it. So just put yourself some tape on your roller. And this is gonna eliminate any lint coming off your roller and getting into your paint and messing your paint job up. Put it on there, just take it off. And that's gonna get any of those strays. Now we're gonna come over here and we're gonna put our roller on our frame and we're gonna prep our roller and our brush. What do I mean by that? Well, we're gonna get it damp. And the reason we're gonna get it damp is because that's gonna increase the amount of paint that can flow between the fibers, and it's gonna avoid oversaturation by pre-dampening the roller and the brush. So get yourself a little bit of water, just put it on there, work it in real good. And then you take your hand, squeeze any excess water out, and that's ready to go. Now with your brush, dip it in some water, get it right here like this between your hands, and spin it out, and that'll get it ready to go. Now before we start painting, it's important to load this roller up really good. And what I mean by that is you just want to dip it in there and roll it on your 5-gallon bucket grid here until it gets nice and soaked. Okay, so once you've got it loaded up real good, we're just gonna do one more couple of dips and not wipe it off as much. And we're gonna set it right there and let that sit. Now, if I know I'm gonna be using a paintbrush all day, one of the things I like to do to keep the paint from going into the ferrule, especially if you're new to this, I see new people always just get paint all up in here. So what I'll do is take a little tape, put it about 1/4 inch above where the ferrule meets the actual bristles. And I'll just tape that up. And what that does is it makes it easier for me to clean at the end of the day. So instead of getting this all over the ferrule, I can just take the tape off, ferrule's clean, all I have to worry about is my bristles. Okay now guys, to load your brush, the first time you do this, I always do this at the beginning of the day and you normally only have to do it once. So you're gonna push down in that really hard. And what you're doing is you're forcing that paint in the inside of your bristles. See how it's super loaded? Now it's all inside my bristles. Now I'm just gonna tap the sides and that thing's ready to go. Okay guys, so this is where that extender comes in handy. We're gonna start on our inside corners here. And I've got my paintbrush loaded up just like I showed you guys before. And how I do inside corners is I work my tip right up into that edge and then twist and then come out. Okay, it's not gonna be perfect the first time. This is just the first coat. But that's how you want it. And then you're gonna continue down your wall. You're gonna offload some paint about 1/4 inch from your top. And you're gonna come back into it. And you're gonna cut it in just like that. Okay, so when we're painting around our frog tape, it's important not to push way down in that. So we just want to come flat here. We do want to overlap just a slight bit onto the tape, but we're going to be real easy with it. Real easy. And it's going to be the same on the baseboards. Real easy. And just don't gob it and push down into that tape because you're asking for bleed through if you do that. Okay guys, this is where I get my 4-inch nap, and I like to use these for inside corners. So I'll get that guy loaded up. And you can see this is a closed end roller. So what that means is this thing has fibers on the outside of the end of this. So when I put it in here, it gets both corners at the same time. And you can see how that extender really, and this is just a 1/2 inch nap. And the reason I like using the 1/2 inch nap is I'll show you when we get to our outside corners. Now another question I get often is, can you paint outside corners with a roller? A lot of guys use brushes and they say, hey, professionals use a brush to cut that in. Not really. I don't, never have. The key though is you want to start out here and you want to lay those fibers in that direction. so that when you get to that outside edge, those fibers are laid down. So once you get to this outside edge, you never want to go that direction with it. You always want to lay it off outside. So you never want to go that way to scrape it off. And I think that makes a darn pretty good line. Now you're going to take your roller, your 4-inch, and you're going to go around your sockets. And that saves you from risking getting any brush marks on that sucker. All right, so we got our wall cut in. This is our first coat. Our roller's nice and loaded up. We're gonna reload it just to be sure. And the reason and of course we're using an extension pole, and the reason I like this 2-to-4 is a lot of times when you are painting a room and you have to pull the furniture away from the wall, you can't like pull it far enough away to get like a 4-inch extension in there. So a lot of times I'll use a 1-to-2 or a 2-to-4. Okay, roller's nice and loaded. And I'll usually start about halfway, go up first, drag it down. And then, now you see how that extender really lets you lay that stuff on. I mean, look at that. And then you just work your way back in. You just want to make sure that's nice and even. Now that's a good example of how that extender lets you get a lot more out of a single rolling session as opposed to like getting 1 or 2 done. Okay guys, so I've spared you the second coat. Now we got to pull our frog tape, so it's important that we do this before it dries completely, and that's further going to prevent any bridging. And you want to be real careful and just pull this out. And you can see how clean our lines are here, guys. And that is what you're looking for. You're not going to be able to get a line like that on that material with a paintbrush. I can guarantee you. Now all we have left to do, guys, is paint the ceiling. And if you want to know the fastest way to do that, hit this video right here and I'll show you guys the fastest way to do it. Until next time, guys.